that is a little bit uncomfortable if I am a Notre Dame fan. So root for a little chaos, Irish fans, and you should be just fine. But if chalk flies, you should be just fine. But if chalk flies and then you have a big upset in the Big 12 championship, that's when things could get a little dicey for Notre Dame. Hello and welcome in. It is our evening edition. Looked at a little tape this afternoon. Looked at some tape of several teams, watched a bunch of games, caught up on some serious storylines, and we have now put together our 10 takeaways from week 13 of the college football season. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. It is always college football. We love our Sunday evening show. It's probably, I don't know if it's my favorite show of the week. It's at worst my second favorite show of the week. I love the preview show too. So it's like picking between your children. I mean, you love them both very much, but this one is a good one because we originally went into week 13 kind of thinking, yeah, you know what? It's a little bit underwhelming. Some of the matchups, just two first ranked matchups, a lot of heavy favorites. We got a little drama. We got some drama. We got some clarity in the ACC. We have some drama in the Big 12. We had very little drama when it comes to the top 12 teams in the college football playoff committee bracket. We'll get to those as well. So throughout today's show, we're going to do a series of a few different things. One, we're going to talk about some of the best performances, what they mean, what it's going to eventually translate to. Two, we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoff. This week is the last opportunity for a handful of teams because there's a lot of teams that will not be playing in conference championship weekend that might make the college football playoff. So we're going to talk about that, what it means. We're going to talk about conference title game clinching scenarios. We will hit that. I'll tell you why this weekend disgusts me every year. I don't like it, and why I'm hopeful and optimistic that this past Saturday is the last of its kind. I'll explain that a little later in the show. And we had originally planned, when putting together our top 10 takeaways, had originally planned a little bit of commentary on James Franklin, his hiring at Virginia Tech, and the Lane Kiffin situation. But we felt like it was more appropriate to focus on results from this past weekend. And then on Tuesday's show, because if you look at the college football playoff committee rankings, like on the show that we normally do that centers around the CFP rankings, we're going to push that to the side because there's not going to be any changes. Highly unlikely to see a lot of changes here this week. So why dedicate a full show to that when we can dedicate a full show to the coaching carousel? So check back with us in a couple days because we will dedicate a full show to what's going to be happening here and what might be one of the craziest coaching carousels we've ever seen. Before we get to the takeaways, I kindly ask all of you guys to go ahead to like the show, to rate the show, to review the show on the podcast platform of your choosing. Doesn't matter which one, it helps us out. We really appreciate those of you that have submitted a lot of reviews. I saw one the other day that we were like super SEC biased. Guys, the SEC is really dang good. But guess what? They're going to get ripped in this show. So don't worry, it's not always SEC bias. You know what we're biased for? Great teams. If you're great, I'm going to be biased in your favor. I can assure you of that. I will also encourage you to go to the ESPN College Football YouTube page. Just go and check that out. Awesome place if you're a fan of the sport. All right, week 13, a lot of control there amongst the top teams. 9 of the 12 teams in this projected playoff bracket were in action this past week. Including, some of the first teams out with BYU and Utah. All 11 teams that we would consider to be in playoff candidates, if you will, they all won. 10 of those victories came by double digits. 7 top 10 teams that played completely dominated. They won their games by an average margin of 37 points, thereabouts. It's the highest single-day average margin of victory by top 10 teams in October or later in AP poll history. But however, I'm going to tell you why I don't ever want to see another weekend like this again. And I don't think we will. That's the good news. All right, let's get things off in an old Western showdown. But now it's Big Ten territory. Takeaway number 1. The Oregon Ducks just got one step closer to a home playoff game. The result there in Autzen Stadium, it was more than a victory. I think it was a statement. It was a bit of a season definer, if you will. And look, we know Oregon's really good. We know they're very talented. We know they've had a couple close calls. The game at Iowa, close call. They maybe haven't always had their best stuff. But remember, this is a very young football team. A lot of youth. Along the offensive line, there's a lot of youth. At quarterback, a lot of youth. A lot of youth on defense. But it's a really talented team. I don't think anyone's ever pushed back on that. So I think for Dan Lanning, and it kind of came out a little bit in the postgame when he's pointing at the SEC and saying, we didn't play Chattanooga State today. And I think there's some frustration with how the Ducks have been perceived. And I think that's perfectly fair because they have been a little bit up and down. And it's not their fault that the schedule hasn't really provided them ample opportunities to go showcase just how good they are. Well, one of the few opportunities they had was against Indiana, and that opportunity was squandered, right? But now it's been, kind of been quietly navigating what's been a solid season. However, they haven't had that statement, that moment where everyone's like, all right, yes, Oregon, yes. Because the Penn State victory from a million years ago, it's become an afterthought with how things have kind of unraveled for Penn State since. Now, Penn State did have a nice win this past weekend, but removing them, I just think this was a really big opportunity for Dan Lanning and for Oregon to acknowledge just how far they've come. This is a team that is rooted in physicality. This is a team that is rooted in discipline in some ways, even though it maybe didn't come all the way to the forefront in this game. There's a lot of undisciplined moments by both teams, which is uncharacteristic of a Dan Lanning coach football team, in my opinion. But the way that they have now adapted to running the football, committing to the run game, it's just a really fun team to watch. And they're really, I think, starting to find their way that is going to make them very dangerous in the event in which they get to the college football playoff. Now, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. It's not a guarantee right now that they're in. They still have to go on the road to Washington and get a big win next week where they're about a 7.5-point favorite. But looking at it, Oregon's got a great quarterback in Dante Moore, very surgical in this game. I thought there was a lot of very impressive parts of his game this past weekend, a lot of smart throws, accurate throws, guys that were running wide open. They took advantage. He didn't often miss. If a guy was wide open, he didn't really miss him, at least from my vantage point. It didn't seem like he did. Like, they feel like he took advantage when mistakes were made. He took advantage. Noah Whittington continues to be one of my favorite players in college football. The guy is incredible, goes for 100 again, 100 plus again. But they also made some winning plays in the special teams aspect as well. I mean, Malik Benson, just an electrifying 85-yard punt return down the left sideline. It just broke SC at that point. It really did. And he showed some speed there as well. You also handed it off to linebackers to get them into the end zone before halftime. So there's just a lot to like about this team. They're a really good team whose arrow is pointing up in a big way. Very optimistic about where Oregon's going. And I know it's weird to say this. I actually think their ceiling could be slightly higher in some ways this year. And that's I loved that team last year, by the way. I loved them. And they got to get healthy. So that's a big start. They got to get healthy at wide receiver and a couple other spots. But it feels like when everything is clicking for this version of Oregon, that ceiling can be just ever so slightly higher than it was a year ago. On SC, very disappointing performance. Dropped now to 8-3, officially eliminated from the college football playoff conversation. Mayava did have a decent day, but the run game, I feel like this SC team, and I hate this for them, I think they would have been different if those two running backs didn't get hurt, and that's part of it, but you lose your top two guys at running back, and then at times the team has become the tiniest bit one-dimensional a little bit, and you also have to give tremendous credit for the amount of disruption that Oregon's defense was able to create. But there was a lot of mistakes made by SC, penalties that were dumb, giving free first downs, gift wrapping touchdowns. They just can't do those things and expect to be competing for college football playoff berths. It's just not going to happen. So disappointing for SC, another lost year, even though a 9-win season is nothing to be disappointed about, given how their schedule lined up. there was more in the tank for this USC team, and they'll kick themselves with how they played at Illinois, because if they don't have that performance, this team probably is in the 12-team field. But this is all about Oregon and what they might be able to do if they can take care of business this upcoming week against Washington. Takeaway number 2, Oklahoma's defense is championship caliber. Their offense is not. Let's start with the good news if you are a Sooner fan. They have won 3 straight games against AP-ranked opponents. And this was a dominant defensive performance after the first drive. The resume is incredible. So to have 3 straight wins over ranked opponents, they have now 5 wins against ranked opponents this year. Who knows what's going to happen with Missouri and where they go. And then if they get to season's end, they will have played 7 teams that were ranked at the time in which Oklahoma played them. Now, it's not all going to work out. And one of the teams, it's not LSU. They were at one point ranked 3rd in the country. It's crazy. It's been a brutal schedule, and yet here they are 1 win away from punching their ticket. But their defense is incredible. What's most remarkable about this 3-game stretch against AP-ranked opponents is that they've done it defensively, for the most part, without their best player. In the last 3 games, R. Mason Thomas, their edge defender, their pass rush specialist, the guy that can take over any game he plays in, he's played just 17 snaps. All 17 of those were against Tennessee. In that Tennessee game, he did deliver maybe the biggest play of the game by returning a fumble to the house, but he hasn't even been out there, and yet they've still gone to Alabama, knocked them off. They still beat a Missouri team and hold them to just 6 points, 0 touchdowns. This has been kind of what they are all year. It's a really good group, an aggressive group. I feel like the coverage in the back end has gotten better. The amount of busts that they make defensively has diminished as the season's gone along. This defense at all 3 levels is elite. No one's pushing back on that. However, the offense is a problem. Another fairly disappointing output, and not going to be pretty. It seldom is when it comes to Oklahoma, but this is a group that has 250 some odd yards of offense. 87 of those come on 1 play. Is that sustainable against top quality competition? If the goal is to win a national championship, you have to be able to score. You have to. And right now, if not for great opportunism from their defense, tremendous special teams, taking the ball off people, I'm not sure this team is going to be able to be a real threat in the postseason unless those things can continue. And maybe they will. I hope they do. But right now, the offense, and all offseason, we talked about Ben Arbuckle transferring down. Man, this is the hottest name in college coaching from a coordinator standpoint. One of the young innovators offensively. He just has tremendous volume. And going into the game last week, we called the Missouri-Oklahoma game. So going into it, I actually went back and watched the 2022 New Orleans Bowl. You're probably like, why'd you watch that? Well, it was Western Kentucky against South Alabama. And the play caller in that game was Ben Arbuckle, going against the defensive coordinator who at South Alabama, who is now the defensive coordinator at Missouri, Corey Batoon. So I went back and watched it, just wanted to see it. And my goodness, they had 700 yards of offense. I mean, vertical shot after vertical shot and running the ball. I mean, just relentless with big plays that were created. And I don't see any of that aggressiveness now coming to the forefront for Oklahoma. And maybe it's because they just can't do it. And if you look at John Mateer, he was the hottest commodity in the portal all season. I love John Mateer as a runner. The guy is a competitor. He runs the ball incredibly well. He finishes runs. He's really nifty, can make you miss. Like, there's a lot to like about John Mateer in the run game. But the pass game has got to take the next step. They got to hit some of these downfield throws. And if you look at his numbers in the game this past weekend, there was at one point, he was 2 for 13 on throws that traveled 10 or more yards downfield. That's just not going to fly. You look at his deep ball, it's too flat. There needs to be more air under it to allow those receivers to run underneath it. I mean, where would this offense be without Isaiah Satania, who's been incredible? He had the 87-yard catch and run on a simple slant, little option route that broke inside, that broke the game open and delivered the game-winning score. So there's a lot to like about their personnel. They have great speed at wide receiver. They have an improving offensive line. They have a quarterback that can take the game over when things go crazy. That off-schedule plays, he can make plays. He's got a lot of game. But why isn't the offense doing what they're capable of doing? They got to be more aggressive. They got to take shots downfield, and they got to hit those shots when they're there, because there's been far too many misses right now. Given the talent of their quarterback and the talent of their wide receiver core, they have got to be better on that side of the ball, because they'll be one and done in the postseason if they can't manufacture more points. I know their defense is elite, but when you're playing against a team like Notre Dame, which, by the way, if the playoffs started today, you would be hosting Notre Dame. Well, you're going to have to manufacture some offense, because Notre Dame's going to get theirs. They are really good on both sides of the football. For Missouri, it was not really a great performance after the first drive. The first drive was fantastic. If you look at it, Ahmad Hardy, the nation's leading rusher, he had just 57 yards on 17 carries. He had 42 yards on his first 7. So that means his next 10 went for just 15. That was his second fewest rushing yards of the season. They did really a great job of kind of bottling him up, tackling, and this defensive line, their gap penetration, really made it difficult for Missouri's offense. They now have 4 losses this season, and they have yet to beat a team that is ranked in the top 25. Takeaway number 3, the ACC race is on. The Pitt Panthers go to Atlanta and knock off the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Final score in this one, 42-28. This was a really entertaining football game. And going back and watching it live last night and going back and watching the tape, I continue to be remarkably impressed with Mason Heinschel. Like, this guy is next level good. That first half, now you got to sustain it. You got to keep the pedal pressed. You got to keep going. And I feel like they didn't really establish much offensive rhythm there in the second half, and as a result, things got a little stagnant and just really never got going. My goodness, man, that surge in the first half of that football game, the way he's able to buy time, the way he's able to maneuver, negotiate defenders, take advantage of pressures, see pressures. Like, there is a lot to like about what that young man can do. He is big time and played that way throughout the course of the game. The other thing I was very impressed with in watching this, what was the biggest challenge for Pitt when playing against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Well, the offensive line really struggled, right? Felt like Mason Heinschel was running for his life. Well, he was running for his life a lot in this game as well. He had to do a lot to buy a little extra time, but the offensive line did play much better. Now, take into account the level of competition. Georgia Tech's defensive front is nowhere near what Notre Dame's defensive front is, but still, improvement is improvement. You can't control who you're playing against, but you can control how you sort things out and how you handle some of those pressures and how the quarterback attacks some of those pressures. I thought they did a pretty decent job of that. I thought the defense really flustered Haynes King. That they did a really good job of applying some pressure and making him make mistakes, making his eyes go where they didn't need to go, and making him uncomfortable, which led to him becoming more inaccurate. He missed a lot of throws in this game, a handful. Now, he made a couple great ones. For example, the touchdown back of the end zone with the toe tap was incredible. There's a couple great throws and a couple great plays made by Haynes King, but there were more bad plays than good. And that is when it came to big, impactful plays. If we're saying, oh, there was about 7 or 8 very impactful plays, well, 4 or 5 of those were bad, 3 or 4 was good. And that's not a winning recipe when so much of what Georgia Tech does runs through their quarterback. He's got to play at a crazy high level for them to win games, and Pitt's defense never really allowed him to do that. The biggest play of the game had to have been the pick six. I mean, you watch it, perfectly played by Lovelace, who's thrusts right out underneath it, snags it, takes it to the crib. Just a massive 14-point swing there. And instead of it being a 7-point game with momentum on Georgia Tech's side, all of a sudden it's 35-14, game, set, match. So a lot to be said about what Pitt was able to do. They weathered the storm. They got out to a great start, then they weathered the storm, and they surged at the end to pull off the upset. It wasn't a huge surprise to us, but I think it was a surprise to many others. What was most surprising, though, was the ineffectiveness and the up and down nature of Georgia Tech's offensive performance. So, really great win. For Pitt, they now need to win against Miami, and they need SMU and Virginia to lose. So if SMU and or UVA lose, Pitt is in. They also, of course, like I said, have to beat Miami. Speaking of SMU, complete demolition of Louisville. Went through and kind of took a peek at this one. Probably the most impressive result in the ACC on Saturday. No one's really talked about SMU. I feel like they've kind of flown under the radar after a fairly disappointing non-conference schedule. But Kevin Jennings is playing at an elite level, their quarterback. Another very impressive day. 4 touchdowns accounted for, over 300 through the year. The way he can kind of extend plays, the way he can buy time. The touchdown pass to Harden was beautiful. This was a statement win. So to beat a solid Louisville team, this is a very solid Louisville team. I know they were without their quarterback. I know they were at less than 100%. But to beat them that convincingly is very impressive. Now SMU controls their own destiny to get to the ACC championship game. So right now it's fairly simple in the ACC. Virginia, they win and they're in. They're playing Virginia Tech this upcoming week. SMU, they win and they're in. So looking like Virginia, SMU right now. But of course, one of those two teams or both those two teams lose. Then the door opens for Pitt. The door opens for Miami. The door opens for, surprisingly, Duke, which is crazy, even at this point. Takeaway number 4. Arch and the Texas offense will be the great what if of the season. Now, if you look at this offense, and I know Arkansas struggles on defense. No one's going to sit here and tell you that Arkansas is the 85 Bears. I certainly won't. But to hang 52 against Arkansas is very impressive. Right? Very impressive. To hang 50 on anybody in SEC competition is an impressive performance. And if you look at Arch Manning, I thought it's been slowly and steadily building. He's been playing better and better and better, really starting with the Florida game. Did have a slight downtick against Kentucky, but the rest of the season's been pretty solid. People will look at the Georgia performance, and frankly, he got hit a lot in that game. There was not a lot there. There were a lot of drops in that game. It was not a good performance from his wide receiver core, but you feel like there's been some significant growth for Texas's offense as the season has gone along. And I'm not saying that, hey, if this offense were playing this well early against, say, Ohio State, and the offense were playing this well early against Florida, it'd be a completely different conversation. Because if this offense were with us for the first 6, 7, 8 games, our impressions of Texas would be very, very different. Just statistically speaking, Arch goes for nearly 400, has 4 touchdowns through the air, runs one in, catches one on what they are now calling a quarterback hat trick, which I had not heard, but I like it. A throwing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown all in a single game. Only 2 quarterbacks have done that in the modern era of college football. Terrell Pryor and Jordan Lynch. Terrell Pryor of Ohio State, Jordan Lynch of NIU. So very, very impressive. And what I like too is the amount of big plays that were created in this game. A ton of explosives, a ton of aggressiveness. And that can carry over. And now that they're starting to hit on some of these big plays, now they're starting to hit on some of these explosives. That's going to be significant. And the connection that has been developed now with DeAndre Moore, the connection that has been developed and cultivated over the last few weeks with Ryan Wingo, the connection that has been developed with the emergence and the renewed health of Emmett Mosley. Like, there's a lot to like about this Texas offense. And this is kind of the offense that we thought they were going to be. Now, they are not immune to great pass rush. I still think the offensive line at times could have their hands full. But there are aspects that have grown tremendously for this Texas group. Now, defensively, it was a pretty decent sized step back if you look at it. I mean, Arkansas's backup quarterback, KJ Jackson, in there. He goes for over 200. Mike Washington goes for over 100. So there's things to kind of take away from it defensively that can be cleaned up, because you never want to give up 37. You never want the game to be competitive when you're playing against a team that's 2-8 coming into the game. So the defense, yes, there were some opportunistic moments, but there were too many sustained drives that would become an issue if you're playing against the likes of a Georgia or an Ohio State, or guess what, a Texas A&M who comes up this upcoming week. So Texas, they're getting where they need to go offensively, but on the other side, the defense may be coming back to earth a bit after what was a very stingy start to the season. So offense going in one direction, defense going the other. If they can just somehow get them both going in the same direction that's going up, this team becomes remarkably dangerous. And who knows? They go out and they beat A&M in convincing fashion, maybe by double digits next week, which I'm not predicting. I just think that if they did, is there a possibility that Texas gets considered as an at-large? Probably not. But depending on what could happen in front of them, a dominant win against the Aggies could really change people's minds about how Texas has been evaluated this year. Takeaway number 5. We really need to discuss what the order is amongst the teams that are currently ranked 11 through 14. And this is on last week's College Football Playoff Committee ranking. We will start with the team that is ranked 11th. That's BYU, who did nothing but strengthen the argument that they have as a team that should be considered as a possible at-large. I mean, this is a physical football team that nobody wants to play against. They continue to play at a very high level on both sides of the ball. I really like this BYU team. I do. They're now 10-1. They're 26-14. This game kind of went exactly like I thought it'd go. I thought BYU would be able to kind of pound it. I thought BYU would be able to wear down this Cincinnati team. And they can now clinch a spot in the Big 12 title with a win next week against UCF. That game will be at home, so they should be in pretty good shape. LJ Martin continues to do remarkable things. 32 carries, 222, couple touchdowns. He's just truck sticking dudes the entire game. I mean, just running guys over. I mean, how many different Cincinnati Bearcat defenders were just bouncing off LJ Martin? It felt like over and over and over again, especially at the end of the game when the Cincinnati defense is desperate. I mean, they have to get a stop. And then it's like, well, LJ Martin, 1st and 10, 8-yard run. 1st and 10 after they pick up the first down. Bear Bachmeier, 8-yard run, just falling forward, right? It's like BYU's always falling forward. They're a very physical football team. I have a ton of respect for him. Bear Bachmeier, by the way, the 4th true freshman starting quarterback to win 10 games in the last 15 seasons. Trevor Lawrence, pretty good company. Jake Fromm, who, remember, took that Georgia team in 2017 all the way to the national championship. And then in 2016, Jalen Hurts. So pretty good company that Bear Bachmeier is in right now. Each of those three guys that we just referenced, by the way, made it to the national championship. Fromm and Hurts lost in the national championship game. Trevor Lawrence won it when he was at Clemson. So very good company to keep right now. BYU is established as the 11th team right now in the CFP rankings. But at 12, it's Utah. And the Utes pulled off a very improbable upset. This was I guess not an upset. They avoided a very improbable upset. But based on how the game was going, you could say, oh man, well, Kansas State, they're kind of in control of this thing. But to win, come back, handle it, 51-47, you cap it off with the Devin Dampier touchdown. It was a 70-yard scoring drive. The 59-yard run on 4th down by Dampier. Utah trailed for a vast majority of the game. It was not good. There, especially in the 4th quarter, things were looking dim for the Utes. And to erase a double-digit deficit there in a moment's notice, this is now their 4th game of the year in which they've gone with 50-plus points. That ties 2010 and 2004 for the most in single-season school history. This is their 4th consecutive game with 45 points. That's the second longest streak since the 6-game streak that had Alex Smith under center. Remember, Alex Smith went number 1 overall, and that was maybe, you could make a case that Utah team was probably the best team in college football. On the other side, Joe Jackson, Kansas State, goes for nearly 300 on the ground. Like, there was a lot to like about what Kansas State is like. Why didn't we get that earlier in the year? Like, Kansas State came into the season as one of the favorites in the Big 12, probably because we thought we were going to see an offensive performance like that. However, it never really materialized. Between Kansas State and Utah, they combined to score 98 points. It's the most in the Big 12 matchup this year. It was kind of a throwback to the 2010s Big 12, where it was just back and forth in shootout fashion. So more here on Utah in just a minute. Miami is right now sitting at number 13. Very convincing victory against Virginia Tech. However, it did not really impact their projection in the college football playoff predictor. They went from 26% to make it to now 31%. But it was a really impressive performance from Carson Beck. I think if you just watch it, you'd be impressed with the efficiency and the accuracy and what he was able to do at times on 3rd down and extending drives. Malachi Toney was outstanding. He goes for nearly $150 through the air as well. Just a very, very impressive performance from Miami. Dominant performance. And if you watch that Miami team, like, I think other teams are getting people are acknowledging that, well, maybe Oklahoma wasn't at their best when John Mateer was at less than 100%. Well, Miami's been without a couple guys too, and nobody seems to acknowledge that. And that is something I think should be taken into account. So Miami sits there at number 13. We'll talk about them more here in just a second. But before we do that, let's talk quickly about Vanderbilt, where Diego Pavia just went out and threw for 484 against Kentucky. That was his final game at home. He is the first FBS quarterback with 450 plus passing yards and 5 touchdowns in a game since Kyle McCord did it in the Holiday Bowl against Washington State. His 484 passing yards were the most by an SEC quarterback this year and the most against Kentucky since Peyton Manning threw for 523 28 years ago. So it was a historically impressive performance from Diego Pavia, and that was against a Kentucky team that on defense, they had been pretty good, at least the last few weeks, with the exception of a game or two here or there. Look, Vanderbilt, they finished with their first perfect record at home since 1982. So a ton of credit to this team. They now sit with a game next week against Tennessee, where maybe they can get that one, maybe they can enter the conversation. But here's the point. BYU's strength of schedule is 28, and their strength of record is 6. They're 11, right? Nothing should alter our evaluation of BYU right now. They have the head-to-head win against Utah. They've looked very impressive in all but one game. And you got to respect some of the wins they've manufactured because it hasn't always been pretty, but they also are starting a true freshman quarterback. Like, we have to take that into account. They are doing a great job under the circumstances. So I think they're secure at 11. 12 through 14 is where I think we need to make some adjustments. Because right now, Utah's strength of schedule is 55 and their strength of record is 17. If you look at Utah's schedule right now, it is not very impressive. Their best win is against a team in Cincinnati that just lost, by the way. Their second best win is against a team in Arizona State who was without their starting quarterback. And they got beat by 3 touchdowns against Texas Tech. They got beat convincingly by 3 touchdowns against Texas Tech. And their strength of schedule is in the 50s. Miami, meanwhile, it's not like their strength of schedule is great. Their strength of schedule is 48. However, Miami does have a win, a real win against a top 9 team. And yet we are not allowing that to factor into the conversation. We also are giving all this credit to teams that have close losses, right? I understand that Louisville's not a great team. I understand that SMU is good, but is shown to be occasionally flawed as well. But you could point to 4 turnovers against Louisville. You could point to a roughing the passer penalty or an unnecessary roughness penalty that extended a drive on 4th and 9 against SMU. If that penalty doesn't happen, how are we evaluating Miami? They're probably ranked in the top 6 or 7 at worst, maybe even as high as number 5. So I'm looking at Miami right now, and there is no reason, in my opinion, why they're sitting behind Utah. I look at Miami's ceiling. I look at Miami's quality. And yes, a little schizophrenic with their performance, a little Jekyll and Hyde at times with their performance, but they're now coming out of it on the other side. I think they're playing at a high level, a really high level. So I think they should be at worst ranked number 12 right now. The question is about who should be ahead, Utah or Vanderbilt. Like I said, Utah currently at 12. I think Miami should be there at worst. So between Utah and Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt's strength of schedule is 26. Their strength of record is 11. Vanderbilt does have a loss to Texas. They do have a loss to Alabama. 2 pretty good losses, relatively speaking. And Vanderbilt doesn't have a lot of great wins by any stretch. They have not necessarily blown the doors off of teams from a high-level teams, that is. I mean, they did beat a Missouri team, solid win. We'll see what happens when they play against Tennessee. But I think Vanderbilt should be in front of Utah as well, given that their strength of schedule is nearly 30 points higher. So Vanderbilt, to me, I don't know why Utah's at 12. I think the committee's put them there from the very beginning. And to me, I think they should probably be 14, whereas Miami should be 12, Vanderbilt should be 13, Utah should be 14. Utah played great, and they were resilient, and they deserved to get the win this past weekend. And while defensively, it left a lot to be desired, offensively, they've been amazing all year. However, we are missing the mark when it comes to the strength of schedule evaluation of the Utah Utes and the quality of some of their wins. It's just hard for me right now to justify them being in front of the 2 teams that sit right behind them. Takeaway number 6. The Irish are passing the eye test, but will it be enough? Now, Notre Dame continues to strengthen its case for the college football playoff. They absolutely destroyed Syracuse, 70-7. 70 points were their most in a game since scoring 73 back in 1932. That was against Haskell, by the way. I don't even know what Haskell is, but pretty impressive performance when you haven't scored that many points in nearly a century. So very impressive. Their 63-point margin of victory was their largest since 1966 and their third largest in the AP poll era. Totally dominant. The fact that Notre Dame's defense and special teams can score 21 points before the offense even touches the ball, to have time of possession numbers the way they were, and yet to have a lead like they had, I'm not sure I've ever seen anything quite like it. Stroman, of course, get the pick six. You block the punt, and just a complete demolition and a historically impressive flex with what they've done now in winning 9 in a row. They have absolutely validated their top 10 ranking. There is no doubt about it. They have style points that have now kind of helped them in their assessment, especially when you look at their offensive and defensive efficiency numbers, just where they would rank in power ratings, which I know it doesn't necessarily matter. That's really just for Vegas, but their power ratings are very impressive. But here's the problem. Their strength of schedule is still 34th, and their best win just took a hit. Ironically, they're being measured a little bit against Ole Miss, whose strength of schedule is at 33, sitting just one spot in front. However, Ole Miss has just one loss. And Ole Miss has a win against an Oklahoma team that is sitting right in front of Notre Dame. So USC getting beat only further highlights Notre Dame's challenge. Now, here's one thing that did help them this past weekend is that Pitt went and beat Georgia Tech. So Pitt will likely find themselves back in the top 25. But how high up will they be? Remains to be seen. So they will likely have 2 wins against top 25 teams, but probably no wins against anyone that's ranked in the top 20. So I don't see a scenario right now where they can host a home playoff game based on their own merits. They're kind of at the mercy of what happens around them. And the goal for Notre Dame is not to make the field. You're going to be in the field. You should feel good about that. More than likely, I would say 90+% likelihood that you are in the field. But how do you get a game in South Bend, Indiana? Well, you probably need Ole Miss to lose at Mississippi State this week. You might need Oklahoma to lose to LSU at home this week. You might need Oregon to go on the road and lose to Washington this week. I think they need at least one of those teams to lose. Because if Alabama wins in the Iron Bowl, then they play against Texas A&M and or Georgia and or Ole Miss in the SEC championship game. Then Alabama can strengthen their resume to the point in which they jump in front of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So while it appears right now at the surface like Notre Dame is very, very safe, I'd be shocked. I really would. I'd be shocked if they fell out of the college football playoff field. However, there is a nightmare situation that is there. Let's just say Alabama wins against Auburn, wins the SEC. Like I said, they will then jump in front of Notre Dame more than likely, correct? Well, here's the scenario that could become problematic for the Irish. Texas Tech wins. They punch their ticket to the Big 12 title, right? Then BYU wins in the Big 12 championship game against Texas Tech, avenging the regular season loss. Now you have a scenario where there's 2 Big 12 teams in the field because Texas Tech right now is sitting there at number 5. They are comfortable, right? They are really comfortable. And the committee last year gave us some precedent with how things kind of shook up when it came to conference championship Saturday. SMU was in a very similar situation to Texas Tech. Very impressive regular season. They lost the conference title game. SMU didn't fall out of the field. They just fell down a little bit, whereas the team that won, Clemson, they went in. So now there's 2 Big 12 teams in BYU and Texas Tech, which could force Notre Dame potentially out of the field. They could get bumped out for an ACC champion. They could get bumped out for the G5 champion. And then the Big 12 gets 2, and Bama wins the SEC. They would jump in front of the Irish, which means the Irish could potentially get knocked out. Now, a lot has to happen, and Texas Tech will be a heavy favorite against whoever they play in the Big 12 title. But that is a little bit uncomfortable if I am a Notre Dame fan. So root for a little chaos, Irish fans, and you should be just fine. But if chalk flies, you should be just fine. But if chalk flies and then you have a big upset in the Big 12 championship, that's when things could get a little dicey for Notre Dame. Takeaway number 7. The big stage is set. The Buckeyes continue to roll along. They're 11-0 for the third time in the last 4 years. They showed just how diverse they can be offensively, right? This is a 42-9 thumping of Rutgers, but it showed kind of the roster depth, the next man up identity, being able to adjust on the fly, to enter the game without their 2 perimeter weapons in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, who's been out for now 3 weeks. Most teams, you lose 2 high-level NFL caliber wide receivers, the offense is going to take a pretty significant hit. Yeah, for Ohio State, it's like, yeah, this is just more inconvenient than it is problematic. So they decided to kind of abandon the vertical passing game. They decided, hey, we're just going to kind of manage this thing. Let's not make any mistakes. Let's not turn it over. It's the only way we lose. Julian Sand, just be smart, throw a couple touchdowns, be efficient. More importantly, you lean on the running attack with Bo Jackson, goes for over 100 and a couple touchdowns. So the ability to pivot for Ohio State from a team that wants to throw the ball down the field and create plays through the air to a ground and pound style is pretty dang impressive. So that's why Ohio State continues to be one of the most complete teams in the country on the offensive side. And the Rutgers offense, look, they had the touchdown and field goal, and the Buckeye defense, which continues to play at an elite level, made Scarlet Knights very one-dimensional, and Ohio State, they really just kind of took that 14-3 halftime lead and made it a rout like they always seem to do. But on the other side of this rivalry, Michigan, been a little bit turbulent, right? Hasn't been the greatest season in the world by Michigan standards, but they found a little bit of a rhythm. You go and you handle business against a Maryland team that is overmatched, but there are some things to like with what we've now seen from Michigan offensively, thanks to the emergence and the career day from Bryson Cusdall. And he goes for 100 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. Going into the game, he had just 106 rushing yards all season and 1 touchdown. So to step up when your number's called speaks to the depth and the culture that has now been created for the Michigan Wolverines. So the stage is set. Massive game next week. We all look forward to this game. And Ohio State is looking to snap a 4-game losing streak, which is wild. They have not lost 5 in a row against the Wolverines since a 6-game skid between 1922 and 1927. Takeaway number 8. Who's in? You guys are probably rolling your eyes at that. That was the ESPN tagline when it was the 4-team playoff and it was introduced in 2014, but it's kind of appropriate now, right? So I figured we'd kind of go through, and we haven't really done this in a while, and kind of tell you who's a lock, what needs to happen this weekend, who needs a win, who's in must-win mode, what have you, right? So I figured we'd just go through the list of all the teams that are still very much in the college football playoff conversation, okay? Let's start at the top. Ohio State, they're a lock, okay? We know they're a lock. I don't think a win against a sub-500 Rutgers team is going to change anyone's opinion. They're the tops when it comes to efficiency on offense and defense. They're top 3 in both categories. And with Texas winning, that helps you to an extent. You also get a win against Washington. That continues to help you. Washington might find their way into the top 25 this week. Illinois losing, does that really matter? Probably not. And the committee, they clearly recognize throughout the season that teams that without their best players, they don't hold them to the same standard. Like if you have guys injured, they're going to understand that. They're going to take that into account. Well, they're without Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Nothing changes for Ohio State. However, their strength of schedule, not good. They're 52 right now in strength of schedule. Now, it will be better after they play Michigan, but they are the worst of the 3 teams that are in that top tier. Indiana is also a lock, so you can just go ahead and punch your ticket. You know you're going. You know you're in. They had a bye this past week. Ohio State is playing Rutgers. A&M's playing an inferior opponent. So Indiana's fine. They got the big win at Oregon. Oregon strengthened their resume, and they're top 5 offense and defensive efficiencies as well. So Indiana's in a great spot. Nothing's changing for them. They have to go to Purdue, and they had a bye to prepare for the Purdue Boilermakers. I think they'll handle their business on Friday night. Texas A&M, also a lock. Now, what could happen with Texas A&M? Now, they have to play against Texas this week, right? So feels like do they have to have it? Maybe not, but it would be pretty significant if they don't get it, right? So if they don't face Bama or Georgia, since they didn't play them in the regular season, and they played just the 12th most difficult schedule in the SEC, that's ahead of only Vandy, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Missouri. They rank right now very well from an offensive defensive efficiency standpoint. So they're a lock to make the field, but not by any stretch a lock to be a first round bye team or even a home playoff team at this point. So a win this week, I think, solidifies that. They are at worst, I think they clinch a bye this week because the SEC championship game will be significant, but to be 12-0 in the SEC with a win against Notre Dame, it'd be hard for me to see them dropping very far, even if they lost that SEC title game. But worst case scenario, they'll be hosting in Kyle Field. They might even get that very coveted 5 spot in the event in which they don't win on Saturday. They're in great shape. They're a lock to make the field. Let's go to Georgia. I think Georgia can solidify a first-round bye with a win this weekend against Georgia Tech. I would be surprised if Georgia Tech pulled the upset. I would. But Georgia, I think a bye is likely if they get a win this week. If they lose this week, I think they're still going to be in the field. I think they might have to go on the road, but probably not because they still have that win against Ole Miss. Will that be factored in, even though Georgia has 2 losses and Ole Miss only has 1? Perhaps. There's a scenario in which Texas A&M loses to Texas. Then the debate between the Aggies and the Georgia Bulldogs could center around the common opponent of Texas, who Georgia beat soundly. And then Texas A&M in that scenario would have lost. So maybe you could switch those 2 teams. But either way, Georgia's in the field. Win this week, they secure a first-round bye. Lose this week, they're probably going on the road in the college football playoff. First round, more than likely, but potentially could have that game between the hedges there in Athens. Let's go to Texas Tech. They're in, I think, regardless of the Big 12 championship game result. I think they win this week at West Virginia. They're in. And I do think if they can go out and pound West Virginia, they can go out and pound, let's say, BYU in the Big 12 title game. I could see them jumping in front of Georgia. I could see it. I don't think it's likely, but I do think it's possible. The thing that would be holding against them is that Georgia's strength of schedule is just vastly superior to that of Texas Tech. So strength of schedule, they kind of need Georgia to lose to get that first round bye, but they can make it interesting. They can at least make it a conversation in the event in which they win the next 2 games very convincingly. Let's go next to Ole Miss, who sits at number 6 this week. This week is a must win. I think if they lose, I think they'll be out. They are at Mississippi State, and I don't think they have any margin for error because we just saw already what the committee will do in the event in which you lose and lose late, perhaps. They saw Bama go from 4 to 10. So I think Ole Miss, they must win this week. If they win, they're in, home playoff game. They lose, they're out. That's fully what I expect because if you look at their strength of schedule, it's the 15th most difficult schedule in the SEC. So second easiest schedule in the league and the 33rd ranked strength of schedule overall in college football. So I think it's a must win this week for Ole Miss. They can punch their ticket to the dance if they can get it on the road in Starkville. The Oregon Ducks, I think they win this week and they're in. They're at Washington, which is not an easy road trip. The Huskies are good. They have a really good quarterback. They have excellent playmakers at wide receiver. Defensively, I do think they might have their hands full a little bit with this Oregon team. It's a really, really good Oregon offense. They can beat you in a lot of different ways. But I think Oregon secures a home playoff game with a win this week. I don't think there's anything to doubt about that. They win this week, they'll be at home. They lose this week, I think they could be out. I really believe that. If you look at where they're at right now, they're sitting at 7. Could they drop to 11? Perhaps. I think that's a real possibility. So I think this is a must-win this week for the Ducks if they want to assure themselves a college football playoff spot. The Oklahoma Sooners win this week, and you're in. I think win this week, you're probably getting a home playoff game, especially when you take into account you still hold the head-to-head against Alabama, who is the one team that could potentially jump in the event in which they win against A&M or against Georgia for the second time. Bama could jump, but can they jump in front of Oklahoma, who has the head-to-head? It's tough to envision that scenario. So you win this week at home against LSU, you're in. You're good to go. And, of course, that 8 spot, very, very coveted because you host that first-round game. Notre Dame, you win this week and you're in. To win 9 straight, amazing, right? You should be so fired up with the response that you've seen. You got to be kicking yourself, though, because you let A&M kind of off the hook. You got off to a slow start against Miami. The only thing, and we already documented this chaos scenario for Notre Dame, is if the Big 12 somehow finds a way to get 2 teams in, with BYU upsetting Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game, then the Big 12, I think, would have 2 in. And if Alabama wins against Auburn and then beats A&M or Georgia in the SEC championship game, I could see them jumping the Irish as well. So that's the only thing you need to be very careful about. Is I don't think it's a 100% certainty that the Irish are in that scenario, but in all likelihood, they should feel pretty comfortable, relatively speaking. And then for Alabama, the opening week loss to Florida State and the challenges to find ways of running the ball, even though it was a little better this past weekend. I think if they win this week, they're in. I'd be very surprised if the committee penalized them from the SEC championship game result, unless they lose the game by, say, 50. I don't think that's likely. So I think Alabama, you win on the road at Auburn this week, you're in. So for the record, just documented the top 10 teams. For those teams that are right behind them, BYU, you got to win the Big 12. Utah, you got to find a way to win the Big 12. Miami, you have to hammer. I'm talking absolutely hammer Pitt this week. If you do, you can potentially get within striking distance of the conversation, but it's still, I think, a little bit tough for me to envision that right now. And then finally, Vanderbilt, I think it's going to be hard for them. If they hammer Tennessee, perhaps, but it's going to be very, very hard for them. For the record, let's go through the lines. Ole Miss opened as a 9.5-point favorite. That now is at 8.5. So steaming just ever so slightly away from the Ole Miss Rebels. The Texas A&M Aggies are a 2.5-point favorite on the road at Texas on Friday night. What a game that's going to be. I can't wait to watch that one. Ohio State is a 12.5-point favorite over Michigan. So a big, big number there in favor of the Buckeyes. The Oregon Ducks are a 7.5-point favorite over Washington. So kind of a tight margin there, by the way, kind of a tight margin. Remember, Oregon was a 9.5-point favorite at home against the USC Trojans. So a slight dip from where they were expected to beat the Trojans last week. That might have actually gotten all the way up to 10.5 or 11 at kickoff. I don't know exactly where it finished, but Oregon was a heavy favorite, a more significant favorite at home against SC than they are on the road at Washington. Oklahoma is a 10-point favorite over LSU, which is surprising because LSU just won 13-10 against Western Kentucky, and their offense has really struggled all season long. It's going to be hard for them to manufacture a lot of points against Oklahoma. Then Alabama opened as a 6.5-point favorite against Auburn on the road. That line is now dropped to 5.5. So little movement there away from the Crimson Tide. I will set the over-under on the above teams losing at 1.5. At least one of those teams is losing. I don't know who. I'm not sure where. I'm not sure I need to pick it right now. One of those teams is losing. I actually think probably going to have 2 upsets this upcoming weekend. I might take the over there at upsets at 1.5 amongst the top 10 teams. Takeaway number 9. Let's go through these real quickly. The conference championship scenarios. We will start in the Southeastern Conference. It's pretty simple in the SEC. Alabama clinches with a win. They beat Auburn. They're playing in Atlanta on conference championship Saturday. Texas A&M also clinches with a win. They go and beat Texas at Texas. They're in. They're going to Atlanta for the very first time. They can also get in if Alabama loses and Ole Miss loses. So A&M punches their ticket with a win and with a couple losses as well. And then Ole Miss can get in with a win against Mississippi State. And they also need a loss by Alabama and a loss by Texas A&M. In that scenario, they would play against the Georgia Bulldogs, and the Georgia Bulldogs need just one loss. If A&M loses and or Alabama loses and Georgia's sitting there at 7-1, they would have the head-to-head. They would go to Atlanta. So one of those 4 teams is going. Alabama and A&M, they control their fate. We'll go next to the ACC. This is wild. Nothing that really, you just eliminated a couple teams last week. Georgia Tech is, for the most part, out. They have a 2% chance to make the ACC championship game, according to the All-State Playoff Predictor. So a massive swing from last week where they were at 61%. SMU has the highest possibility of winning it right now. They can win, and they are in. Virginia also controls their fate. They win, they're in. There's also other ways for those 2 teams to get in, but it requires a lot of explanation. Virginia, for example, can get in if Miami beats Pitt, SMU loses, and there's a tiebreaker between Georgia Tech, Miami, SMU, and Pitt. So Virginia can still get in if they lose, but to simplify things, win and you're in, Wahoos. SMU, same for you. Pitt can get in if they win against Miami and SMU and Virginia lose. One or the other. One of those two teams loses and Pitt beats Miami, they will go to Charlotte for the ACC title. Duke, they need a win this weekend. They need losses by at least two of the following three. They need Pitt to lose, SMU to lose, or Virginia to lose. So two of those three lose and Duke wins, they'll go to the ACC championship game. And then the real chaos scenario, Miami. Miami needs to win. They also need Virginia to lose, Duke to lose, and SMU to win. That's the simplest way for Miami to get there. So they need Virginia Tech to beat Virginia. They need Duke to lose as well. And they need SMU to win. That's how Miami gets in, but feels unlikely with Virginia being a very heavy favorite right now against Virginia Tech. The Big Ten, Indiana gets in with a win this week or an Ohio State loss. Pretty simple. Ohio State gets in with a win or an Indiana and Oregon loss. Pretty simple. Those two teams control their own fate. If they're victorious as double-digit favorites this weekend, they will play in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. Michigan can get in with a win over Ohio State plus an Indiana loss or an Oregon loss. So they got to beat Ohio State first, and they need Indiana or Oregon to lose, and then Oregon can get in with a win and an Ohio State loss to the Michigan Wolverines. So a little simpler there in the Big Ten. The AAC, basically the College Football Playoff Committee and BCS rankings formula determines who will play in their conference championship game. So it's some combination, North Texas, Tulane, and Navy. Right now it's looking like Tulane as the inside track because of their strength of schedule. The Sun Belt, James Madison will play the winner of Southern Miss and Troy this upcoming weekend in the Sun Belt Championship. So those are the conference championship game scenarios that could impact the college football playoff race. Takeaway number 10. I am so ready to get rid of these ridiculous games in November. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I do not like FCS. I do not like G5, P5 matchups on November 22nd. I just don't. If you're going to play these games, play them in September. Totally good with that. You want to play them in September. Money games, big opportunities for these schools to go play. But for example, Alabama beating Eastern Illinois 56-0 does absolutely nothing for me. Alabama's execution was not flawless by any stretch. Did have a couple turnovers offensively. They did get the run game going, though. They rushed for a season high at 270. Kevin Riley gets in some action. A.K. Deere gets in some action. And I do think it was really good to shut out an opponent. Anytime that happens, that's good. It requires discipline defensively, especially with the depth. I think probably 90 guys played for the Crimson Tide. But this game belongs in September. We don't need to see it in November. Texas A&M routs Samford 48-zip. Georgia beats Charlotte 35-3. Clemson beats Furman 45-10. Auburn beats Mercer 62-17. Put these games at the beginning of the year. And the good news is we are no longer going to have, and we called this Cole Kublik. I got to give him some credit for this. Cole Kublik has called this lettuce week. Like, nobody wants more lettuce. Like, that's exactly what this week has been for a very long time in the SEC and the ACC. It needs to go away. And luckily for us, the consumer, the college football fan, these games are going away in November because the SEC has adopted the 9-game conference schedule. The 9-game conference schedule, all of those games against FCS or G5 opponents are now going to go out the window. So November will be filled with compelling playoff determining outcomes, playoff determining games. Like, we need, and I've said this for years, the regular season of college football needs to serve as a crescendo. It needs to get a little bit louder. And for those of you that don't know the musical reference, basically a crescendo it means that the note starts quiet and then it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder all the way through as you hold the note, as long as the music requires you to hold the note. It should be a crescendo. The season should be a crescendo to where it slowly and surely escalates and escalates and escalates, and then it peaks at the end of the year. We should be creating momentum within the sport throughout the year so that the games in November are of the most significance. Yes, October is going to be great. September is going to be awesome. But those games should get more important and they should be more challenging as the season goes along. We don't get that right now in the current version of the college football scheduling format. It needs to go away, and it will, thank goodness, because I am tired of seeing blowouts that mean nothing in the second to last week, the penultimate week of the college football season. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. We encourage all of you guys to go and check out the podcast, whatever podcast platform you use. We encourage you to go check us out and subscribe to the podcast. If you're there, leave us a review, leave us a rating. That's great. We always appreciate the support that you show the show. And we also would encourage you to go check out the ESPN College Football YouTube page. Tons of great content on there for you if you are a diehard college football fan. We will be back here in a couple days. We still have a massive rivalry week edition of college football previews. We cannot wait for this week. It's my favorite week of the year. It is the most consequential. It's a legacy game for many, many of the players. It's in some cases the last opportunity for you to make a statement for the College Football Playoff Committee, maybe make a statement about your career, senior days, emotional moments. There's nothing better than rivalry week, and it is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you guys are as excited as we are. We will also do a coaching carousel show here in a couple days where we will hit it from every possible angle. We'll talk about Lane Kiffin's situation. We'll talk about James Franklin being hired at Virginia Tech. We'll talk about the openings, and we'll talk about what movement could happen and how we need to adjust the calendar to better accommodate some of these coaching moves so that they don't have to happen prematurely. So you don't want to miss that show. It's coming up here in just a couple of days. For all of us here at Always College Football, from Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.